The SEAL team crouched in the narrow mountain gorge. Enemy forces closing from 3 sides. No escape route. Radio crackled with static. Every support position had gone silent. Then a single shot echoed from the ridge they'd assumed was empty. 1 hostile dropped. Then 2. 3 more. The enemy squad scattered in panic as precise rounds found their marks. "Someone's up there," a SEAL whispered through the chaos. The commander's eyes never left his scope. Voice barely audible. "She's here." Lina Rictor was 30 years old. European with dark brown hair pulled back tight, a small frame, and sharp eyes that spoke little. She had been assigned to Outpost AR-17, a freezing, high-altitude station near the border, to provide technical forensic support after a series of mysterious disappearances to the Special Forces station there. Lina was just backup, tech support. She wore technical jackets, took notes in corners, and nobody ever saw her handle weapons. The SEAL team called her Ghost Tech because she always appeared exactly when something went wrong, then vanished silently again. One night, after the team returned from a failed mission, Lina quietly made her way to the armory. The guard on duty teased, "Don't grab that M110. It's not for analysts." She smiled, walked past, and selected a different rifle. Nobody knew she had registered temporary authorization for long-range, counter-support weapons in the command room. She was ordered to assist with topographical mapping. Strictly no combat participation. But in her eyes, the map was actually a landscape of memories. The base had a strange rhythm. Morning briefings where she sat in the back corner analyzing patrol routes that others saw as dots and lines, but she saw as breathing terrain. Lunch breaks where she'd disappear for exactly 23 minutes, long enough to walk the perimeter, check wind patterns, measure sight lines that no technical manual would ever document. At night, while others played cards or video called home, Lina would stand by the communications array, listening to static, not for intel, but for the spaces between sounds, the frequencies that revealed what the mountains were hiding. Sergeant Mills once asked why she never joined the evening poker games. "I'm mapping," she'd said simply. He thought she meant digital cartography. She meant memorizing every shadow, every angle, every position where someone might need help. When the radio died, the M2010 in the armory had been tagged unreliable for weeks. Scope drift, they said. Temperature sensitivity. Lina had walked past it 14 times, and each time she'd noticed something the weapons text missed. It wasn't the rifle that was unreliable. It was the mounting system designed for standard positions, not high-altitude, extreme angle shots. 3 days before the mission that would change everything, she'd quietly recalibrated the scope herself, adjusted for wind patterns specific to Ridge 13, calculated trajectories for shots that officially shouldn't be possible. When asked about her background, Lina always said data analysis and technical support. True, but incomplete, like saying the ocean is wet while not mentioning its depth. The team had started noticing small things. How she'd glance at weather reports and frown before storms that weather satellites missed. How she'd suggest route modifications that seemed random, but always avoided the areas where patrols went missing. How her technical equipment bag was heavier than it should be for someone who only carried computers. Specialist Jackson had joked, Either Ghost Tech has supernatural instincts or she's been here before. He was more right than he knew. The morning of the fateful mission, Lina watched the SEAL team gear up with an expression nobody could read. She'd reviewed their planned route 17 times, knew exactly where it would go wrong, but her authorization was clear. Support only. Observe and report. As they departed, Commander Stratsford handed her the communications headset. Monitor their progress. Document any deviations. Lina nodded, clipped on the headset, and opened her laptop. On screen, a real-time map showing 6 moving dots entering a canyon that she knew better than her own heartbeat. Because 3 years ago, she'd crawled out of that same canyon alone, carrying secrets that would never appear in any official record. I once interviewed a sniper who told me the best ones aren't in the files. They're on the edges of maps, always watching, never noticed. Lina was exactly that type. From the first moment she looked at that 3D terrain display, I knew she wasn't just analyzing maps. She'd been there before. The mission. 6-man SEAL team infiltrating Grell Canyon to identify an enemy radio control station. The plan seemed simple, but when they entered the rocky gorge, they discovered they'd walked into an ambush. Retreat routes blocked, radio communication failed, heavy cloud cover eliminated air support possibilities. One SEAL asked, "Any elevated positions with line of sight down here?" "Only Ridge 13, but that's been abandoned." At Command Center, Lina monitored the situation through her terrain simulation model. When she realized the trap was closing, she removed her headset, grabbed the forgotten M2010 from the rack. The sniper rifle, abandoned due to unstable range performance. She didn't ask permission, didn't file a report, just left the station. Moving across snow-covered terrain, the distance to Ridge 13 was 2.3 kilometers of brutal uphill climbing. Lina moved like someone who'd made this journey before, not checking her map, not hesitating at trail splits, not slowing for altitude. Her breathing stayed controlled, despite the thin air and sharp incline. She knew the mountain's moods, how wind patterns shifted every 40 minutes, how the granite faces created thermal updrafts that could throw off a bullet by 3 feet, how the snow cover absorbed sound differently depending on depth and temperature. 14 minutes after leaving base in the canyon below, enemy forces had the SEAL team pinned behind insufficient cover. Machine gun fire kept them down while flanking squads moved to finishing positions. Then a single shot from the supposedly empty ridge above. The enemy machine gunner dropped instantly, precise headshot from 3,050 meters, a distance that should have been impossible given wind conditions and altitude variance. Enemy forces panicked. They'd planned for ground-level opposition, not sniper fire from a position their intel marked as inaccessible. Second shot, third shot, each one surgically precise, targeting key tactical positions, not spray and pray suppression fire, calculated elimination. Shots that dismantled their coordinated attack. The SEAL team didn't know who was providing overwatch. They only knew that the abandoned ridge above suddenly had someone on it who shot like a legend. At command, radar systems confirmed shots fired from 3,050 meters. No ID confirmation? An officer whispered. That shooting pattern identical to the 3-round sequence at Bravo Line last year. But nobody remembered who had fired that legendary sequence. Radio chatter filled with confusion. Unknown sniper, unknown sniper. Confirm your position. Silence from Ridge 13. The enemy squad, now missing their heavy weapons operators and squad leaders, began a chaotic retreat. They'd come prepared for a 6-man special forces team, not for someone who could place bullets with surgical precision from nearly 2 miles away. SEAL Team Leader Morrison grabbed his radio. "Base, we need immediate identification of friendly sniper support. Someone just saved our mission." Command responded, "No sniper deployment authorized for your AO. Repeat, no friendly sniper assets in your area." Then who the hell is shooting in the canyon? The tactical situation had completely reversed. What had been a death trap became a successful extraction. The enemy radio station lay abandoned as hostile forces fled the area. But the real mystery was on Ridge 13. As the SEAL team secured the canyon and prepared for extraction, they kept glancing up at the ridge, trying to spot their guardian angel. Nothing visible, no muzzle flash, no movement. Professional-grade concealment, Morrison noted. Whoever that was knows their craft. At exactly 13:47 hours, 3 precise shots had turned certain defeat into mission success. The shots came from a position that military doctrine classified as tactically impossible. Too high, too far, too exposed to wind variance. Yet someone had been there. Someone who understood that specific terrain better than the maps suggested possible. Someone who could calculate bullet drop, wind drift, and target movement with the precision of a computer and the instincts of a ghost. Back at command, Lina returned to her station, exactly 18 minutes after leaving. Her technical jacket was dusty, her boots carried traces of high-altitude snow. Her laptop showed she'd been monitoring communications the entire time. When asked about unusual radio traffic, she responded, "Standard tactical chatter, nothing outside normal parameters." But her eyes held something different now. Not the quiet anonymity of a technical analyst, the sharp awareness of someone who just remembered who they really were. The M2010 was back on its rack, cleaned and properly stored. The scope that had been unreliable now showed perfect calibration. The ammunition count was exactly 3 rounds less than inventory records indicated. Colonel Strandford reviewed the after-action reports twice, then locked them in classified filing. The successful mission would be documented. The mysterious sniper support would become one of those stories that circulated quietly among special operations communities. The kind of story that made people believe in guardian angels with rifles. Nobody officially connected the dots between Lina's brief absence and the impossible shots from Ridge 13. But that evening, when the SEAL team returned to base, Morrison approached her workstation and quietly said, "Thank you." Lina looked up from her computer screen. "For what?" "You know what." She returned to her keyboard. "I was monitoring communications. That's all." I stood at Arca Base, exactly where Lina had departed for her climb. The wind there causes scope drift of 0.7 degrees per second. Nobody goes up Ridge 13 at that hour unless they'd survived in places even colder. And Lina? She went without looking back. Type ridge shot, if you believe. Some ridges stay empty until history returns. After the rescue, the SEAL team demanded verification of their unknown support. Base command remained silent. A small team climbed Ridge 13, finding only shell casings, a thin fabric windscreen, and one unfired bullet placed on stone, engraved with 327. That designation had appeared in classified files. 327, confirmed sniper identity, unknown. Colonel Stranford summoned Lina. She entered wearing different clothes. Not her technical uniform, but an old jacket dusted with gunpowder residue. Stranford asked, "How did you know that position was accessible?" She replied, "Because I lived under Ridge 13. Rocks. That year. When my team didn't come home." She was the sole survivor of Cerberus Echo, a unit declared missing in action during the 2020 Northern Line operation. The story emerged slowly, like photographs developing in a chemical bath. Cerberus Echo had been a specialized reconnaissance unit, 6 operators trained for deep mountain infiltration. Their mission: establish forward observation posts in hostile territory, gathering intelligence on enemy supply routes through the mountain passes. 3 weeks into deployment, communication ceased. Satellite surveillance showed no movement at their designated positions. Search and rescue operations found abandoned equipment but no personnel. After 60 days, Cerberus Echo was declared KIA, killed in action, bodies unrecoverable. Official records stated, unit encountered superior enemy forces, no survivors. The truth was different. The unit had been betrayed by compromised intelligence. What should have been empty territory was heavily fortified. When they realized the trap, Cerberus Echo chose to fight rather than retreat, buying time for a humanitarian convoy moving through the valley below to escape enemy artillery. 5 team members died, holding 3 different defensive positions. Lina, designated 327 as the unit sniper, had been positioned on Ridge 13 with orders to provide overwatch and document enemy positions. For 72 hours, she watched her team members fall, one by one, unable to help, unable to retreat, unable to call for support, because their radios had been compromised. Using them would reveal her position and doom the civilian convoy in the valley below. On the 3rd day, enemy forces found the convoy's new route. They were setting up artillery to massacre 200 refugees when Lina broke her silence. 3 shots. 3 precise eliminations of forward observers. The artillery crews, now blind, couldn't target the convoy effectively. Those 3 shots, the legendary 327 sequence, allowed the convoy to escape, but they also revealed Lina's position. What followed was a 6-day survival ordeal. Lina, alone on a mountain, hunted by an entire battalion. She used terrain knowledge, weather patterns, and sniper tactics to stay alive while enemy forces searched every cave, every trail, every possible hiding spot. She survived by becoming invisible, moving only during weather fronts that masked thermal signatures, eating snow and emergency rations, sleeping in positions where she could wake up shooting if discovered. On day 6, extraction forces finally reached the area. They found her positioned exactly where Ridge 13's optimal shooting position would be. Alive, alert, and still maintaining overwatch on the valley where her team had died. Medical evaluations showed severe dehydration, frostbite on 3 fingers, and psychological trauma consistent with combat stress. But when debriefed, she refused to discuss tactical details, refused psychological counseling, and refused recognition for her actions. Her official statement: "I was in position, I maintained position, that's all." The military offered medals, promotions, and specialized assignments. She declined everything. Instead, she requested transfer to technical support roles, analysis, communications, logistics, anything that kept her away from combat operations. For 3 years, Lina Rictor became a ghost in the system, highly skilled, but deliberately invisible, requesting remote assignments at outposts like Arca 17, where she could work quietly without drawing attention. But some capabilities never disappear. The ability to read terrain like a book, to calculate impossible shots by instinct, to move through hostile territory like smoke. Military psychologist noted in her file, subject exhibits classic survivor guilt, combined with exceptional operational capabilities. Recommends administrative duties only. Combat effectiveness remains unknown, but likely significant. They were wrong about combat effectiveness. They were right about everything else. When the SEAL team found themselves trapped in the exact same canyon where Cerberus Echo had died, when the radio communications failed in the exact same pattern, when the tactical situation matched her 3-year-old nightmares, something awakened in Lina. Not revenge, not anger, something simpler and more powerful. The knowledge that she would never, again, watch teammates die when she had the capability to prevent it. The M2010 she'd selected wasn't random. It was the same model she'd carried during Cerberus Echo. The scope she'd calibrated wasn't standard procedure. It was muscle memory from a different life. When she placed that unfired bullet on the stone engraved with 327, it wasn't just a signature. It was a promise to her fallen teammates, to the SEAL team she'd saved, to herself. Standing in Colonel Strandford's office, Lina felt the weight of 3 years of silence lifting. She'd spent so long trying to disappear that she'd almost forgotten who she'd been before the mountain took everything from her. The designation 327 Stratford, continued, appears in 17 different classified reports. Impossible shots, perfect tactical timing, no confirmed identity, because I requested no records. But you were there. I was always there, watching, waiting for someone else to need what I could provide. The colonel studied classified photos, canyon positions, trajectory analysis, weather reports from multiple operations, the Bravo Line incident, the South Ridge extraction, the Desert Rose convoy protection. All you? Lina nodded once. Why no recognition? Why no official status? Because some people aren't meant to be seen. They're meant to be where they're needed, when they're needed. Nothing more. The SEAL team waiting outside the office stood at attention when she emerged. Not because regulations required it, because respect demanded it. Morrison stepped forward. If you ever run training courses, I want to be first in line. For the first time in 3 years, Lina smiled genuinely. The best lessons can't be taught in classrooms. Comment 327 lives. If you believe not all legends wear medals, some carry silence. Arca Base established a corner called Ridge Point. No photographs, no bronze statues, just a wooden plaque reading, "If you're surrounded, look up." Quietly, Lina accepted the position of instructor for static shooting. No weapons allowed. Only lessons in listening and reading terrain. Through wind, snow, and silence, one student remarked, "I used to think shooting was about winning, but she teaches shooting is about keeping promises." The transformation of Lina from ghost to mentor happened gradually, like seasons changing. She didn't announce her new role or deliver inspiring speeches. Instead, she simply began, sharing knowledge that had kept her alive when death seemed certain. Her first class had 12 volunteers from various special operations units. They arrived expecting advanced marksmanship techniques and left understanding that the most important skill was patience. "Before you touch a rifle," she told them, "learn to breathe with the mountain. Weather changes every few minutes up here. Your heartbeat changes every few seconds. The rifle is just the final step in a conversation you've been having with the environment for hours." Training sessions occurred at dawn, when thermal conditions most closely matched combat situations. Students learned to read wind patterns by watching snow drift, to estimate distances by observing how sound traveled between peaks, to predict weather changes by feeling air pressure shifts. Lina's teaching method was unusual. She would position students at various points around the base, give them no equipment except binoculars, and ask them to describe what they observed. Not just visual details, everything their senses detected. "What do you hear?" "Wind, ma'am." "Maybe some equipment noise from the motor pool." "What don't you hear?" Students would pause, confused by the question. "Bird call stopped 3 minutes ago. That means movement in Sector 7. Equipment noise change pitch. Someone's working on diesel engines, not generators. The wind isn't steady. It's gusting every 40 seconds, which means weather front approaching from the northwest." Week by week, her students learned to perceive their environment as a living system rather than static scenery. They discovered that effective sniping wasn't about perfect aim. It was about perfect awareness. Advanced students were taken to Ridge 13, not to shoot, but to understand positioning. How Lina had selected that exact spot among hundreds of possibilities. How she calculated not just range and wind, but thermal updrafts, sound masking, and escape routes. "Every position tells a story," she explained, standing exactly where she'd saved the SEAL team. "This position says, I can see everything, reach anything, and disappear completely. But it also says, I'm committed. Once I shoot from here, extraction becomes secondary to mission success." The most powerful lessons happened without words. Students would arrive for training to find equipment arranged in specific patterns, routes marked with subtle indicators, or scenarios set up that required creative problem solving. One morning, they discovered targets placed at impossible angles around the mountain. No shooting position seemed viable. After hours of analysis, one student realized the lesson. Sometimes the best shot is the one you don't take. Ma'am, there's no angle that works, correct? So what's your solution? Change the situation. Instead of forcing the shot, now you're learning. Each week, Lina handwrote a different message and posted it on the rock face at Ridge 13 Summit. Students weren't allowed to photograph the messages. They had to climb to read them. Recent messages included, "Patience defeats panic. Invisible is more powerful than invincible. The mountain remembers everything. Make sure it remembers you well." Climbing to Ridge 13 became a pilgrimage for serious students. The physical challenge of the ascent, combined with the mental challenge of understanding Lina's lessons, created a unique training experience that couldn't be replicated at traditional facilities. Type, "I'd climb to read if you believe some lessons must be earned, not downloaded." One morning, Lina was gone from base. On her desks, the M2010, cleaned, perfectly aligned, with a small notebook containing one handwritten line. "I don't leave traces. I leave vision." Ridge 13 became a secret training destination for elite snipers worldwide. Every year, on the anniversary of the SEAL Team Rescue, students stand silently on the summit for 1 minute, looking down into the canyon below. In each heart, a small figure appears, quiet, unassuming, but never underestimated. Her disappearance was as mysterious as her presence had been. No forwarding address, no final briefing, no formal farewell. Security footage showed her leaving base at 03:47 hours. Carrying a standard hiking pack, tracking systems lost her signal at exactly the point where Ridge 13's approach trail began. Search teams found no trace. It was as if the mountain had simply reclaimed one of its own. The training program she'd established continued without interruption. Students still climbed to Ridge 13, still found handwritten messages, still learned lessons about patience and perception. But now the messages appeared without explanation. Different handwriting, different languages, different perspectives on the same fundamental truths. Some believed Lina was still there, watching, teaching through mystery. Others thought former students were continuing her tradition. The truth became less important than the legend. Military records listed her as transferred, classification pending. Her personal file contained commendations for exceptional service and technical support role, with no mention of combat operations or specialized training programs. But in the unwritten archives of special operations communities, her story grew. New details emerged in quiet conversations between veterans. How she'd appeared in impossible moments, in impossible places. How her teaching had saved lives in operations that would never be declassified. The Ridge 13 training site attracted students from units that didn't officially exist, from missions that never appeared in briefings. Navy SEALs, Army Rangers, Marine Scout snipers, and operators from agencies that had no names. They came seeking technical skills, but discovered something deeper. The understanding that true effectiveness required complete integration with environment, mission, and purpose. A memorial plaque appeared on the summit. No one knew who installed it. The inscription read, "She taught us that legends don't need names. They only need the courage to be present when presence matters most." Winter storms and summer heat couldn't erase the messages that continued appearing on Ridge 13. Students reported finding fresh instructions carved into stone, written on weather-resistant materials, or somehow burned into the metal of abandoned equipment. The messages always contained practical wisdom. Wind speed at dawn tells you afternoon weather. Count heartbeats between shots, yours and theirs. The best position is the one your enemy can't imagine. Whether Lina continued leaving these lessons or whether her influence had inspired others to carry forward her teaching, remained one of military folklore's enduring mysteries. But every sniper who trained on Ridge 13 understood the deeper truth. Some teachers leave behind knowledge that outlives their physical presence. Their real legacy isn't in records or recognition. It's in the lives saved by skills they shared with those who needed them most. If you believe in stories that touch hearts like this, leave a comment and don't forget to subscribe to Iron Heart Stories. We tell the tales that shouldn't be forgotten. Real people creating and telling stories.